right before Memorial Day, 2006. And we had hit just this catastrophic IED ambush. Marines just burned terribly, and I kind of recognized as the officer, I got to be strong.
All right, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of The Resilient Show. And I'm super pumped for today because not only have an awesome guest, but I have a friend here, Tommy Waller, retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, was a colonel of 3rd Force Recon Company, which we both served at. And now currently he's the president and CEO of the Center for Security Policy out of Washington, D.C., making huge impacts for our nation on a national security level. And we got so much to talk about on a personal level, on this side of resiliency, to hear your perspective on resiliency, not only in yourself, but in our country. So pumped to have you on, man.
Yeah, it's a huge blessing to be here. Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, man,
thanks for coming, man.
I know there's some gifts hidden right here. We won't bring them out yet, but I'm super excited. We always give gifts for the show, but he's got some gifts.
You got some gifts to us this time.
Yeah, so I love gifts.
For sure.
So we got so much we want to get into, but I want to start off talking about, I've known you for quite some time now, but there's a lot I don't know about you. So I'm super interested in how you became, Tommy Waller, how you became, commander of 3rd Force Recon Company, how you became the president and CEO of Center for Security Policy. Where did it all begin, outside of just generally being our hometown, Louisiana?
Yeah, well, just a calling, honestly, which I can only explain as something that, the good Lord just put in my heart as a little kid. I remember 4 years old, Christmas time, my grandparents gave me the Christmas present was like G.I. Joe pajamas. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was a uniform.
Yeah.
It was just something for whatever reason. Both grandfathers served, one as a Marine in the Pacific. I never got to meet him. He unfortunately died when my mom was very young. Wartime stress caused stomach ulcers, right? And he unfortunately died from that. And then my other grandfather served in the U.S. Army Air Corps and then the Air Force after that. And so there was I was drawn to that from tiny little kid, right? So as I grew up, that's just all I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the Army for a little while because I didn't know the Marine Corps existed. So I fault myself for that, But yeah, so just I was very blessed that in high school we had a Marine Corps ROTC program.
Oh, okay.
The officer that ran it.
Where was high school?
Ponchatoula,
Louisiana.
Yeah, Louisiana. Yep. So
this Louisiana thing, bro. What is up with these people coming from
Greg Lappin? It produces Louisiana produces men. Like, look,
we can swim, we can cook.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh,
pulling trawling nets out of the water full of shrimp. Where I grew up, there's no skinny forearms. There's no skinny forearms. Everybody's pulling crab traps and
cast nets. Yeah, it's a good time.
Man,
it's a good time
dude.
growing up in Louisiana.
Oh,
yeah. So so I was blessed that in high school, 14 years old, going to a school that had a Marine Corps JROTC program, and they start training you in leadership and, what it means to be a Marine even before. And so I kind of, joke about I played Marine for 8 years. All I wanted to be was a real one. And I had gotten an ROTC scholarship to Tulane University in New Orleans. And so for 8 years, I did everything I could to prepare to be a real Marine. And that helps as a kid, if that's what you're called to do.
Yeah.
And that was the case. And so,
what's the ROTC program at Tulane?
So it's a Navy ROTC program, but if you want to be a Marine, you're, a Marine option, is what you call it. But like the scholarship, I'm the oldest of 7 children, and my parents were like, look, you want to go to the Marine Corps, you need to be an officer, right? And I was just like okay, whatever you say, if you want.
Sure.
Of course, I later found out, wait a minute, I'm not the dude kicking the doors in and pulling the trigger. Wait a minute, But to their credit, when I was little, I'll never forget my dad. Audubon Zoo was right across from Tulane in New Orleans, and there's a park, and they had this big, meteor thing stuck in the ground. I'm climbing on it as a little kid, and he points over. So that's Tulane University. You're gonna go to school. One day you're gonna go to school there. I'm little, right? And that's a school that is tough to get into, and it's not cheap. There's no way you got 7 kids. You can't pay. Look, I couldn't pay to park there. I had to cut people's hair to pay to park there. You know what I'm saying? It's expensive.
Yeah.
And so it was a blessing to be able to do that. And then, my wife, I met her in high school. It's the first girl that ever liked me.
Yeah.
And she's way out of my league. Right? So it was a blessing to be able to go to school somewhere where I was able to be close to home. And so we were married shortly after college, and of course right before all the all the combat deployments that came with the beginning of my career.
I want to back up because you mentioned the Audubon Zoo, and I grew up, not far from you, and went to the Audubon Zoo growing up. And I want to know, did you see the statue of the Rougarou?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Can you tell, like, for listeners what the Rougarou is?
Yeah, because I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think about like this swamp monster with like glowing eyes, and I think they say like it's the Honey Island swamp, But
It's
as a kid,
owl head, alligator body, like wolf hands.
just there's so many like swamp legends,
Okay.
But the Audubon Zoo and now the Aquarium of America is another place where they integrate these things. But yeah, there's a lot of legend.
Yeah,
there.
well, they have I remember like going to kids and see the statue of it. They have the Rougarou has a sack over his shoulder with kids in it.
Get out of here, bro.
And so and it's a place you bring kids. So like as a kid, they would say like I remember my grandparents would be like, you'd be bad and be like, the Rougarous will come and get you.
Look
and
out, bro.
And I had like about a half a mile walk through the woods to the bus stop at like 6 a.m. with like all kind of noises.
Worrying about the Rougarou coming around the corner,
man.
bro.
Like
Yeah, that's where that courage comes from.
That's
South
hilarious.
Louisiana.
what resiliency,
Resiliency to the Rougarou.
yeah, man.
That's funny.
Yeah,
I hadn't thought about that since I was little.
Oh yeah. If you don't know what a Rougarou, like, definitely look it up.
Yeah,
I couldn't spell it. If
insert that into the show notes.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it before.
Oh yeah, it'll make it. You ask why Louisiana has some tough guys coming out.
That's why it's the Rougarou.
And overcoming the fear of the Rougarou.
It's hilarious.
What was it like growing up with in a family of 7?
Yeah,
man, it was awesome. Yeah, I mean, so 6 boys, 1 girl. She was right in the middle, so she's well protected.
Yeah,
tough.
She got her own room. The rest of us shared a room.
She's super tough. Like,
yeah, she's tough, but
mentally tough.
yes, but just beautiful inside and out. And and her husband was one of my brother's best friends.
Okay,
and he's like, we could never have picked a better brother-in-law. So I mean, we truly, like all the men, just get along like brothers. So it's one of the parts about resilience, and we'll talk about is family. And having a father that sets the example, right? Spiritually, number one. And so we were very blessed, still are very blessed, that we have that kind of tight family, mother and father that love each other and set the example for us in life.
What did he do work-wise?
Turned crude oil into gasoline for about 4 decades at a refinery, and very thankless work. Where he did not go to college, went straight into work to start providing for the family. And so, of course, in the petroleum industry, when you're talking about like petroleum engineers and whatnot, that college degree is a certain, there's like a level there. And I guarantee he could run circles around probably most of the petroleum engineers that had that check mark.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was part of the reason about, hey, you're going to go to college, right? Because you see that, society kind of puts the ceiling on people's careers based on some diploma, even though they may know the processes 100 times over, so he worked hard and commuted almost an hour there and back every day to that refinery to provide for the family.
So powerful, man. We see, we talk about this a lot on the show because I think it's such an important role in resilience in today's culture. But I mean, the brokenness in the family and the brokenness in the homes, especially when it comes from a leader as a father.
Yeah.
Most of the issues that we have, I think, stem from that. I was a police officer for a long time, and most of the kids that I dealt with that were getting into trouble didn't have a leader at home in any way, shape, or form as a father. He was abandoning them since they were a baby. So it's just such a, when we get to see stories of that consistency and that structure in the home, and that leadership in the home, it's always such a powerful thing.
Certainly was for us. I mean, we're blessed.
Yeah.
You look at my siblings and their sort of, success, if you will. I mean, every single one of them, our parents could sort of brag on if they wanted to for like what they're doing in life. And not necessarily from a financial perspective, be like getting rich or anything, but just like, meaningful accomplishments in life in a whole bunch of different areas.
Character, impact, purpose. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, things that matter.
Yep.
So does that play a role in your role as a dad now? I mean, I know you got an amazing family now. Like,
absolutely. I mean, I want to be the kind of dad my dad was.
Yeah.
And so when you have an example like that, it just makes it so much easier, really. So yeah, it's a blessing. And I noticed, throughout the Marine Corps, when it came to dealing with trauma and stress and those sorts of things that come with combat. It also, and I'm sure you probably saw the same thing in law enforcement when it comes to dealing with these things, having that anchor in your life and somebody you can call your dad, both physically and spiritually, your spiritual father. Those two were such a huge asset for me.
Yeah.
Right. So some of the toughest times in my life of just being terribly sad, for example, of the loss of your fellow Marines. I had on my third combat tour, it was rough. It was difficult. I mean, we had a third of our platoon lost their lives in that deployment and half wounded. And it was probably about this time of year. It was right before Memorial Day, 2006, and we had hit just this catastrophic IED ambush, and Marines just burned terribly, and I kind of recognized as the officer, I got to be strong for these guys. I can't.
Because you're the platoon commander
at the time,
second recon battalion, yeah.
Right. So this, and I mean, unfortunately, it was my third combat deployment. I'd been in Afghanistan before and Iraq before, and so for the men, even though, so I didn't even have it when I went and interviewed to go to second recon battalion. The normal process is like you go through, the selection process and the NDOC, and then you go to BRC and all this stuff, right? I just got back from a combat tour. I'm interviewing with the XO, and I'm kind of trying to figure out, like, when do I do all that? Put it on the calendar. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm on like post-deployment leave. And he's
where'd you come from before?
So I was at 1st Battalion, 6th Marines.
Okay, so you're an infantry platoon commander there.
Right. Yeah, I guess we should back up. So after I was commissioned, I became an infantry officer.
Well, let's back up even further before we go to that. So
yeah.
So the people, because I want to make sure we don't overlook the young men and women that are looking to go in. So you're going to college, and you're in ROTC, but you enlist at 18. Because you have to, while you're going to college, you can enlist as in reserves.
So you swear in is yeah. So I took the oath on my 18th birthday, to support and defend our Constitution,
knowing you were going to be an officer.
Right. Yeah. Right. So you swear in. So like if you decide that if you flunk out, if you decide to quit, well, you're going to either owe Uncle Sam a whole bunch of money, or you're going to go serve in the enlisted ranks for as long as it takes to pay that back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So you're in at that point. Right.
Right.
And so, but it's still not, it's still college. And
right.
So, but that is officially where my service started, was on my 18th birthday. And, and yeah, I mean, in terms like if you have the desire to have a college degree, or if you have some profession you want to go into that requires it, it's a good deal, right? I mean, Tulane University is not cheap. They pay for everything, room and board, all that. For me, I started in engineering for like 2 weeks. Poli-sci, baby. Like, I just needed to get a commission. I just want to be a Marine, so I didn't really care about so
like, what's the fastest route?
Right. Yeah. So I did like international relations, and I figured, well, I'm going to be doing international relations sort of.
Yeah, sure.
What I mean? Yeah. On the tip end of the spear. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but midway through, you go to basic course.
So yeah, if you're going to go that route in ROTC as an officer, you'll go through each summer. There'll be different training that you'll do. Right. So I was blessed that, if you're physically fit enough, you can go to like Mountain Warfare School, right? Mm-hmm. So I did a package there with a sniper platoon at Mountain Warfare School, did the high angle shooting course in Hawthorne, Nevada, like awesome stuff. But you end up going to officer candidate school in between your junior, senior year.
Okay.
And so that is, you pass that. And then as soon as you graduate, you get commissioned, you go straight to the basic school, right? So as a Marine officer, regardless, unless you go to the Naval Academy, regardless of what your specialty is going to be, you're going through the basic school. Every Marine officer needs to be trained as a basic infantry officer, right? At least basic infantry skills. And it's kind of funny when you first get there, like, who wants to be infantry, right? Like, all these hands go up.
Yeah.
And then, you go to the field a few times.
Yeah. Everybody changes their mind pretty quick.
Who wants to be infantry? Like, there ain't enough hands going up, what I'm saying? And so, but that's, to me, like, I didn't even know that they had anything but infantry for most of my life. Like, that's
what you do. Yeah.
Like, you're going to be a Marine, you're supposed to hunt humans, this is what we do. And so, but it's a challenging course. And so, we graduated that, and it was right at the beginning of OIF 1. Mm-hmm. And so, in fact, a couple of us, there's 3 classmates, the top 3 graduates from the school, we were asked, hey, like, if you forfeit all of your leave, all of your what should have been like 30 days of transitioning from all the schools to your first unit. We can get you right overseas to Kuwait right now for the invasion. And we did that, forfeited all that. And then I ended up getting scooped up by a different battalion and missing the invasion, but instead going to Afghanistan. And so my first tour was there in Afghanistan. Part of the 22nd MEU was in the boat company. So did a whole, wintertime workup in the water.
Yeah, of course, it's got to be wintertime.
Right,
and amphib workups in the wintertime.
Right.
Yeah. Why would you want to do it in the summertime?
Yeah.
It's Marine Corps.
And then you pack those boats up, stick them on the ship, and then it just like head straight over to Afghanistan. Don't unpack a boat, you know? So, but by the time I had got to that third, so that Afghanistan, 2004, 22nd MEU, came back and immediately turned around and went to Fallujah and took over for 3-5. So this was right after Phantom Fury. So we were kind of there after most of the death and destruction that took place for that portion of the war. And this is when, we're letting people move back in the city. And that was my second combat deployment. The third one was 2nd Recon Battalion.
And yeah, so now we're back to second Recon Battalion. Tell us about the deployment,
yes.
Some of the things that happened there.
So when I was on that second tour, I had found out they were looking for officers to come over to 2nd Recon, right? And this gets me back to where we were at just a minute ago. As I'm interviewing for, coming in and thinking like, okay, when am I going to do the NDOC and BRC and all that? And the XO is like, you still got all your stuff packed from your last deployment? I'm like, yes, sir. I just got back. He's like, 4:30 tomorrow morning. We're getting on a bus. We're heading to Mojave Viper for like pre-deployment, the last pre-deployment training. So it was like, there was no screening. There was no NDOC. There was no BRC. It was just like, we need officers that are good to go. You got combat experience. We don't care how many rocks you can put in your rucksack. You're going to prove yourself in combat. Okay. So
yeah, good to go.
So, and of course, just tried to do the best I could with that, and I had a platoon full of just amazing studs, awesome guys. And one of the regrets I have is I didn't get to know a lot of them, as much as I wish I could have before they died. And so,
and how many did you lose? And
5 in that one deployment, including interpreters. So,
and so people don't know, recon platoon is, you've been the platoon commander, you're talking 2024.
Right. Depending on how many attachments you have and all. Yeah. 3 6-man teams. Right. So, so not a lot. And this was a situation where the enemy had changed tactics overnight, really. Right. So at the beginning of that deployment, what we would do was just drive at night. Because the biggest threat was IEDs, right? Improvised explosive devices. So we would just drive at night as fast as we could on nods. And most of the time they couldn't time it right to hit us just right. And they had changed tactics completely, literally like on a moment's notice, where they went to pressure initiated devices, right? And seeded this entire area with them. And so we were in a spot where the battalion, look, 2nd Recon Battalion at the time was only about 150 guys. We had 150 square kilometers of terrain that we owned, battle space in between Fallujah and Baghdad. And it's all this fertile farmland that had a lot of, there was a lot of safe houses for jihadis coming from all over the world, right? So they would push in and take harbor in this place, and then they'd be able to push into Baghdad or Fallujah to do their bad stuff. It was our job to go find them. And so that's a lot of battle space for a small group. You can't control it, right? And so there was an operation the battalion was doing to try to push through a certain area and sweep it and search it. And so we were on a blocking position to keep bad guys from escaping, and had to make a decision about when do we move? Well, we'll move at night, And I always tried to make sure the platoon sergeant and the team leaders were part of the decision-making process. Every single mission, unless it was last minute and I had to make a decision as the officer, it was always with the input of the guys, because a lot of times these Marines, they're sharp, right? And I've had them tell me, and thankfully, I had one Marine one time, God rest his soul, Corey Palmer, he's an unbelievable stud, and I had a certain idea, and we won't say the full language. He's like, sir, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And it was kind of quiet.
Right.
And the platoon's like, oh. So, I said, okay, go ahead and explain that. And he did. And he was right.
Yeah.
And what was amazing is at the end of that deployment, I found out one of the guys had said, sir, you really earned a lot of points from the guys two times on that deployment. Really? Yeah. Well, the first time, was like whenever our trucks got blown up and the engineers' metal detectors were blown up, and like you took the flashlight and just swept the road in front of the whole convoy, just walking. I'm like, yeah, that was terrible. You know, it was kind of scary.
Yeah.
You know, and then the other time, which was really impressive, is when, you know, you didn't just like jump right down Corey Palmer's throat when he said that was the stupidest effing idea he ever heard.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, so like kind of like semi-heroic like bravery and just like letting a dude speak his mind. Like, okay. But when you're dealing with smart studs, man, you know, and he was right.
Yeah.
You know, so
what is your, maybe share a little bit of your leadership thought, philosophy, whatever you want to call it on that. I mean, I think we see a lot of leaders that would act the exact opposite. Like, you challenged me. How dare you challenge me? Like, what have you learned in your military career as a leader and dealing with guys that are spun up, guys that are good to go? You know,
in the recon community, you're going to have guys that, you know, like he says, smart and then they're on the ground. They know what's going on. If you're watching and wondering what I'm holding here, this beautiful piece of equipment, this is the Smith & Wesson Volunteer. It's one of my favorite firearms from Smith & Wesson. And I am a proud ambassador of Smith & Wesson firearms. I have been a lifelong fan of Smith & Wesson. They are one of the most iconic American companies, have been around for 170 years, making the best firearms, Second Amendment focused. And I love the people there. This from the CEO to the vice president that have become personal friends of mine. They are supporters of our military and first responder communities. In fact, they are supporters of Mighty Oaks, which makes them the premier sponsor of this show. And if you are in the market for one of the best firearms out there, then whether it's a rifle, a pistol, for whatever reason, for hunting, for self-defense, you need to get yourself a Smith & Wesson. You can't go wrong with Smith & Wesson. The quality, the craftsmanship, and the company itself is no way you go wrong. So check out Smith & Wesson and get yourself one of the most iconic American firearms you get your hands on. Smith & Wesson, my go-to, and a proud supporter of Mighty Oaks and our military and first responder communities. All right, guys, I want to thank one of our show sponsors. By the way, all the sponsors for Resilience are supporters of Mighty Oaks for our military and first responder communities. No better one than Gators. Gators has been serving the military and first responder communities with the most incredible American-made eyewear for 35 years. Lifetime frames. Before I got involved with them professionally, I wore Gators all over the world through military operations. The ballistic lenses are something I really believe in. The aluminum frames, just the clarity of the lenses, their polarization. I wore them for skydiving because they have a polarized lens that allows you to see digital screens. And so for skydiving, shooting, you name it, all the crazy activities I do, I wore Gators. And then now I'm blessed to be in a relationship with them, and they're an amazing partner for Mighty Oaks. The best eyewear out there. Again, lifetime frame, American made, 35 years of service to our military and first responder communities. There is no better eyewear out there than Gators, and they look super cool. So I love mine, and get yourself some.
As an officer in that community, I think, so number one is just humility, like ego. If you, like, they'll sense it.
Yeah.
If you are not humble. So like admitting and being humble, like you don't know everything. Like, I'm here to learn from you guys, right? But then doing as much as you can to set the example so that when you show up on the range, you're still shooting among the top if you can. If you're PTing, you're still leading among the top if you can. But then having like just a genuine humility about it. Like, so humility combined with performance, right? I think is a huge point. And you got to know your trade. I mean, you expect every one of these guys to know what their job is. You got to know yours as an officer. And so we just kind of joke about it, where the guys would be like, "Sir, you can't come into the room until the blue chem lights come out. We can't afford to lose you because you got to do the PowerPoint." You know, well, I got to better be pretty dang good at PowerPoint if that's part of my job, right? I got to be good at briefing generals, right? If it's up to me to make sure I can communicate to higher headquarters to make sure the guys get the right mission, that's my job. I better be good at it, right? And so kind of knowing your role and taking it very seriously, being humble, but then still trying to make sure you can keep up with the real studs doing the real stud stuff, even though it's not your job.
Yeah. I like, I like humility coupled with performance.
Yeah.
I know those two things. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that before, but humility coupled with a high level of performance as well.
I think, from my observation, it's one of the things I've always observed is, not just in the recon community, but just in general in military, is guys will respect and follow people that take responsibility, not just for the victories, but for the failures too. Like when leaders take responsibility and own it, and people respect that.
Yeah,
and they'll follow that.
Right. And then just listening, right? Because a lot of times the guys would have way better ideas than I do. If we had time, we would integrate those ideas. But there were some times where, I'm doing the pre-mission brief. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is the plan, and a Lance Corporal would raise his hand and be like, well, hey, sir, what about this idea? It's like, dang, man, that's a really good idea. And I'll look at the platoon sergeant and the team leaders. I'm like, that's even better than all the stuff we came up with, but it's too late. But then that young Marine says, okay, well,
you acknowledge
yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he understands why we can't do it because of these reasons, right? So just try and, when you can, if you have time, to get the input of the team.
Yeah.
It's just not about you.
Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as somebody has to be in charge, and somebody has to make that final decision, and that's on you. And so they're looking at that too. They're like, is this guy to be decisive? Right. And people follow decisiveness.
And then I guess to get back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago with, resilience and being the guy in charge after that very tough, terrible stuff, you got to maintain your composure. Even if you're sad, even if you're full, your heart is full of grief and suffering, you got to maintain your composure in front of the guys. But then you also have to grieve, right? And that's where I kind of learned at one point, like, man, I need to be alone for a minute, and so, I never forget, just basically, hey guys, I got rooftop security tonight. Sir, you don't, that's our job. No, I got it. So I need to be alone. You know what I mean? I didn't tell them that, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I get up on that roof, with my rifle on security, and then just let myself freaking go. Just cry my eyes out.
Yeah.
Right. And back to the question about like the formation of family. Thank goodness on that deployment, I had a freaking Iridium phone, right? 00697. You knew that code.
Yeah.
And then called my dad, Dad, I can't stop crying. Right. I mean, what a blessing I could do that. Right.
Yeah.
And then, I later on realized that I wasn't just calling my dad, because I was on that rooftop talking to my Heavenly Father too. Right?
Yeah.
So that relationship between, father, son, physical and spiritual, has everything to do with your ability to cope with that grief and that loss.
I really think this is, when we talk about resiliency, there's probably not a better illustration of what you're talking about right now. When you're in a place like combat, not everybody, very small percentage of the people listening will be there, but it just relates to every aspect of life. And this is just such an example. Like when you're in a situation like combat and you lose a 30-year Marines, most situations, if we're back home and something like that happens, everything stops. There's a grieving process. People come in and support. When you're in combat, you have to wake up the next day and finish the mission. And as a leader, you have to lead them to do that. Like there's still a mission that has to happen. There's a time for grieving, but the mission's at hand still. And that's just such a unique place. And it takes a certain amount of resilience individually to be able to do that. But then culturally as a unit to be able to, these are your friends. These aren't like, these are your friends this is who you had breakfast with the day before. And you joked about, about back home with, and they're gone. And now you have to keep working. How does it, what did that look like for you? And what did that look like for your Marines as you led them to be able to saddle back up and go back out and operate?
Well, I got to give some credit to my XO at the time. He pulled me aside and he's like, listen, and this guy, he was so smart. He quoted the page, and there's a publication called Infantry in Battle, right? And he quotes the page and he's like, the number one thing that your guys need right now to deal with fear is busy work. And not busy work in the sense of like busy, but like to get back out there and fight, right? Because we needed resupply of, ammo, weapons, demo, fuel, medical supplies, all that stuff. And then, there was a time when I could kind of tell some of the guys were probably not wanting to get right back up and go right back out. And that's when the XO pulled me aside, and said, hey, this is exactly what they need is to get right back in it. Because you let it dwell too much and that fear can start, eating up at you. So you have to stay engaged. But then of course you also have to figure out how to grieve. And it was a blessing for me that I could reach out to both of my fathers, my physical and my heavenly father, to do that. And what I noticed is the Marines who had the most difficulty afterwards with post-traumatic stress, with, debilitating flashbacks, or those that never was able to, they were never able to share the story with anybody. Like they didn't have a relationship with their dad that they could call their dad and talk to him about it. They didn't have a relationship with their heavenly father where they could pour their heart out to their God and creator. And so they kind of kept it all just inside. And then it would manifest itself in, the type of flashbacks where they would literally taste, smell, feel all the same things. And then all of a sudden be in a position where, man, I don't need to be parachuting today, And so a lot of that resilience, I think, it gets built in you from the blessings of those relationships. Yeah. And if you don't have that, there's still ways to get it right. I mean,
what's the social and spiritual pillars that we talk about in the 4 pillars of resiliency? I mean, you got some very tough. You got some mentally tough men. You got some physically tough men, some of the most physically tough men on the planet. So you got 2 of those pillars, but if they're not socially, and they're just not their teammates, but socially having that pillar or spiritually having that pillar, those are 2 essential pieces that are missing. And it'll break guys. I mean, you've seen it, I've seen it, and it's break guys. Yep. Did you do like an ad hoc memorial service? And how fast did that happen?
Yeah, we did. It was probably within about a month, and so in Iraq, on every deployment, obviously, we would do that when we could, and it was special and meaningful, and it was necessary. You absolutely have to do that, right? Yeah. But it's like one of those deals where you kind of need to plan it, where you have you can't stop whatever the mission is at the moment. But we absolutely did that, and that's why, like, from now on, if I ever hear Amazing Grace played by bagpipes, like, it's hard to hold it together.
You guys played it there, and
yeah.
I want to. You're talking about something super, super powerful because, I mean, you, like you said, it's a blessing you had this earthly father, but also have access to your heavenly father. Some people listening right now won't have access to an earthly father. It's probably one of the biggest things that we see, right, that we're struggling with. But we all have access to a heavenly father. So I've spoken with guys that I'm close with that have been to combat, and they struggle with feeling like, man, how could I be in a relationship with God when I've done these things, right? Like I've gone and killed men. And so I'd just love to hear from you as somebody who's both has a strong foundation with their creator and also somebody who's been to combat and war. Like, what is your thought process in reconciling that and for guys who are struggling with that?
Sure. I don't know. The first thing that came to mind when you asked the question was David. Here's this little brother. All the big brothers are out there, like, scared to fight the Philistines. And not only did he fight him, he cut his head off.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And this is, we're told, a guy who's a man after God's heart. And then he did a whole bunch of other pretty dumb stuff as a king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which resulted in, like, adultery and murder. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. Like, the guy really messed up a lot in his life and also did violent, terrible things to other humans. Mm-hmm. He was made after God's own heart, is what we're told. Right. So that's just what immediately popped to mind was there's in biblical history a lot of examples of men that had to do violence, and yet were still could still be holy men, right? And so I think maybe that's one piece, and then the second piece is because maybe I think unfortunately our society kind of makes Jesus out to be like
soft.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like when you think about
like he's from Boulder, Colorado, or something.
No, seriously, like pale, and there's nothing against like the Christian imagery of Jesus, like with because you see like these pictures of like kind of pale face and like really peaceful looking, and the shepherd, like, okay, I got it. But think about what he must have looked like and felt like during scourging, every single piece of his body just getting ripped apart.
Yeah,
and like the amount of discipline and toughness to endure all of that when he could, he could have had legions of angels come and schwack all those Romans, right? But he took it, right? And so I think that's the other thing is to know that that God gave us his only son, and his son was a stud.
Yeah.
I mean, a carpenter in those days would have had calloused hands, Popeye forearms. I mean, when he went to his hometown to preach and they tried to push him off the cliff.
He was like, "It's not happening today, bro."
They said he walked through the crowd. Like, I mean,
right.
Yeah, he was an intimidating dude, and I think the Bible estimates, like somebody did a calculation, that he probably walked like over 30,000 miles during his
ministry.
His ministry, yeah, like I mean, not in Nikes,
right?
Yeah,
right.
Sandals, like he slept on the ground, like on rocks, like no sleeping bag or an isomat. Like he was a tough dude.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. What I'm curious, Chad, because there's a different story here, right? Like same trajectory to an extent, but we have somebody who was raised in a structured, healthy home, raised to have a relationship with Christ. Somebody who was raised in a very broken home, was not raised to have a relationship with Christ. You later found Christ. How did you reconcile like the stuff that you did? I mean, I love the illustration of David. Is it similar?
Well, there's a contrast here. I mean, there's a contrast of I know Tommy. He said he's had his struggles, but he had the resilience to bounce back and hold this, hold himself steady through that. And because he had that earthly father and heavenly father, I had neither. I had lost my earthly father through abandonment. And my grandparents, but I really didn't have an earthly father to lean on. And so I always sought after role models of men in the Recon community, but they weren't godly men. They were just tough men. And so I was following the wrong earthly role models in absence of father. And then I chose, like you said, the godly father's available for all of us. I chose not to follow that because I had a flawed perception of Christianity as being weak. And so I chose that's something I can do when I get older. And so I left that void in my life. And so the result was different. He had the resilience. Like I said, he may have struggled some, but he had that resilience to bounce back and hold himself steady. For me, I fell apart. I almost lost everything. I almost lost my family. Almost took my own life. Like I spent years in debilitating panic attacks and anxiety. And there's things that, I came back in 2007. I still deal with things today because it left such a deep wound in me because of those years absent to Christ. And I'll probably deal with some of those things. I believe God can heal anything, but I'll probably deal with some of those things for the rest of my life because of the damage I caused to myself, to my family. And man, but the one person I kind of lean to is David because I look at myself as being just a complete scoundrel, and David was a complete scoundrel, like in his life. And I mean, right now I'm reading Psalm 42 because this is David, like a man who's like feels disqualified. God's not answering him. He feels alone, and he's crying out. He's in like this argument with God, like listen to me, like he's crying out to God, like but all through his life of being like the self-reflecting as this degenerate person and unworthy. Even in that state, he always cried out to God. He never stopped crying out to God, even in his lowest moments. And so that's where I'm at today.
Yeah.
But it took me a longer road to get there. And in that long road, there's a lot of damage caused.
Yeah.
And so, I'd encourage everybody. That's why the resiliency program of Mighty Oaks is so important to me. I love our recovery program, our legacy program. I love helping people that are broken find hope and restoration and new purpose again. What I love more is going to Marine Corps boot camp and speaking about spiritual resiliency in the front end so that they don't have to experience what I experienced. They could experience it through what he had and I didn't.
Yeah.
And that's why the resiliency piece is so important to me when I go speak it. These thousands of recruits and young troops in these events that we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're the right messenger, man, honestly. Because there's a lot of, it takes a special guy to be able to deliver that message because of who the messenger is and what they've done. Right. So it's genuine. All the pain that you experience. These guys look up to, I look up to you the same way. Like the things that you have done, unbelievable, still to this day, what you're doing at Mighty Oaks overseas, these people want to be like you. So, God put you in a special spot to be that messenger. So there's a reason why you feel that and they need it.
I think it's important to come across people say sometimes like, how do you go up and share like the vulnerable of how like not my successes, but the failures. And it's so important to share our failures and not just with me speaking to troops, but like even your families. Like we always talk with our kids about like, hey, look at all these things I did as a success. Like if you work really hard, you'll do that too. Like it's very important to me as a dad to share my failures. Absolutely. Because we always talk about success, but they need to know that dad tried hard one time and he fell on his face, but he got back up. It's important to share those lessons.
And I was just piggyback on that. I think that's one of the most. I think we're so worried as men and fathers that our children are going to see us fall when literally the most important thing we can show them is how to get back up.
The biggest lessons they can learn. Yeah.
And also when to listen to mama.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Seriously. I mean, like, I remember when I was getting ready for dive school, I'm training, I'm doing the SOCOM test every chance I get, breath holds, everything. Right. South Louisiana, man, I'm in Lake Pontchartrain with a tack board, running into crab traps, working on my fin times,
That's a really good place to train for.
Although, when you get to dive school, you're like, man, I can see 6 feet.
Yeah. And you got some chop there in Lake Pontchartrain.
Yeah. Alligators and stuff. And, but I literally right before I started getting scared, I'm like, oh man, I'm starting to come up with excuses on why I can't go. And my wife looks over at me, and I won't say the exact words, but it was to the effect of like, stop being a wuss and go to dive school.
Yeah.
So like, there's times when, and I find myself constantly needing to make sure that I'm listening to my Eve. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's appropriate for our kids to see that too, so that they know to look for their own Eve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I love this contrast, dude. I'm sitting here as a side here in the contrast. It's pretty amazing to hear, like you said, Chad, what resulted from, brokenness and struggle. And no doubt, I mean, I'm sure there's extreme amount of struggle and trauma, obviously, throughout your life, Tommy, but there's two very clear differences in the way you guys, the foundation y'all were given. And so I think just as a highlight, like looking back, I think for men who are watching this, like maybe you had a broken home, right? Maybe you didn't, but you can give the structure and consistency to your children, because someday we have to break the generational cycle, right? Because that's what it becomes, right? As you're like, oh, I had a bad dad, so I'm going to be a bad dad, or I'm going to do a little bit better than my dad did. But it's still, let's face it, like we're not that great. Like somewhere something has to change and flip. And there's very two clear examples of no doubt hardship, no doubt great times, but definitely a difference in the way,
Well, you hear me talk about the X all the time, right? Now, and I'm hearing him talk, and we talk about like the X, and we both faced some traumatic things on in Afghanistan and in Iraq for you. And when you heard you say you got on that roof and you were able to cry out to your Heavenly Father, I was thinking about myself and what if I would have did that, right? But instead, I didn't have that. I didn't choose to do that, and I chose just to hate. And that hate, like I just wanted to, I want vengeance. I wanted hate. I wanted to live in that hate, and ultimately it eroded me, like as darkness took over me, and it almost cost me everything. Because you're not meant to carry that yourself. Human beings aren't capable of carrying that kind of hate,
right,
and anger inside themselves.
Or if they're capable, I guess we are capable, but it does what you just said. It turns you to darkness.
Yeah, I mean, you're capable for a moment, but eventually,
But if you're going to maintain a heart that
it's totally unsustainable.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then there's a difference between hate and anger, right? There is such a thing as righteous anger.
Absolutely.
And in fact, St. Augustine said that hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to make sure they don't remain that way. Mm-hmm. If you don't get angry at the evil in this world, about the bad men that want to do bad things to good people, if you don't get angry about that, and you don't have the courage to confront it, then you don't give people hope. Right. And that's one of the things that's awesome about how Mighty Oaks, you guys have branched into doing these operations overseas, where you're helping people in the midst of suffering and chaos. Mm-hmm. You got angry about that stuff, and you had the courage, right? And then you're giving people hope, just like St. Augustine said. Yeah,
that's such a good point. Yeah, because there's a huge difference, and you're right. Like we have to, we have to be able to rise up. Something has to stir inside of us to want to make change. But there's a dark side that when you cross that line,
right?
And that's where I went.
Yeah,
and a lot of guys go, and like you said, you could do it in a moment. It feels like it functions really well, but I could tell you, like from years of seeing guys that like Navy Cross recipients, the Silver Star recipients, and they were crushing it in combat, and they get out, it just was unsustainable, and their lives are ruined because they weren't able to sustain that, living that way without taking that 1,000-pound backpack off and giving it to a Heavenly Father that said we're not ever meant to carry that load ourselves.
Right.
And having someone to hand it off to.
It's a huge point.
Yeah. So we're talking about the contrast, but you guys, have like a cross path.
Convergence.
Yeah, convergence. Yeah. So You want to talk about that, Chad?
Well, I mean, we ended up being the commanding officer of 3rd Force Recon Company, which is, it's funny. I read about 3rd Force Recon Company as a teenager, and read the book about them in Vietnam, and so I was infatuated with this unit, and it's some great stories in that book, and I still have it on my bookshelf. I just seen it yesterday, in fact. But it ended up being a unit I served at, and I got to know you from being there, and we have a lot of mutual friends. And then when the Afghanistan evac came up, there's a lot of people I could have took on this Tajikistan operation to go into Tajikistan and do the fording reps of the Tajikistan River, the Panjshir River, to get these women and little girls out of Afghanistan and into Tajikistan. And when I was putting that together, there was a Marine we both know him to be very motivated, extremely motivated, Dennis Price, and he was just on me to come. And he was scout sniper and just lots of experience in different things. And he just really wanted to come. And I'm like, you can't, because you're still a Marine. Marines are allowed to come. And he's like, we just asked. So I'm calling you and saying, hey, you have this Marine there. He's super motivated. I want to take him with me. I'm taking one person because I want to keep it small. I want to take Dennis Price with me. And I think at first was like, I don't think it's possible. And then you said, put it in writing. And I did. And then you probably won't give yourself enough credit, but you courageously said yes, knowing that I was probably something that was probably not a wise idea as a commander, about to cut him loose to go on a humanitarian mission in Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, it depends on what you consider wise when you're looking at. If you're thinking about your career and checking the box to make sure you don't get in trouble so you can get promoted, probably not that smart.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about, somebody who's being called to go, here I am, Lord, send me, then it was the wisest thing I could possibly do. Think about me as a man.
Yeah.
If you and Dennis are being called, who am I to say no? Right. And so, I didn't even ask permission from the higher headquarters. I just told them after the fact. And
by the way, after the fact, it would be the commanding general of 4th Marine Division. Right?
I'll just say I got a phone call. Yeah. So, it's very unfortunate how at that period of time where the focus was of most of our general officers.
Yeah.
To be blunt about it. The most important thing at that moment in the late summer, fall of 2001 was your percentages in your unit of a certain inoculation.
Yeah.
It
wasn't training. It wasn't like combat readiness. It was like,
that was the number one thing.
Is there, what percentage is vax? What percentage is infected? That was number one thing.
Yeah. And even, peel back the clock a little bit more to the beginning of that year, the stand down that we had to do for extremism in the ranks and the emphasis. So, if as an enterprise, the DOD at the time were more attentive to the things that mattered, they probably would have been a lot more helpful to guys like you who were trying to get our allies out. And so, given the opportunity to have, some of our guys go with you, I didn't want to say no to that.
So listeners know, and I have a book out, and I don't know how much you talk about in the book, but in Saving Aziz, and you mentioned, of course, in Saving Aziz and in the script of the film, they actually picked that story to be in the film. But one of the things that people may not realize is when former special operations veterans do missions like this, humanitarian missions, not all of them do, but I know we do. We don't just go and roguely go do. There's a lot of deconfliction. We let JSOC know where we're going. We let SOCOM know, and some of the stuff we did in Ukraine, the Pentagon knows. There's a lot of deconfliction because you don't just go out there and roguely on a battlefield. I mean, if I'm moving hostages out of a house and Delta forces going in a house and I move them, I could cause a lot of problems. So there's a lot of deconfliction. This isn't rogue operations. There's a lot of coordination with the military to do these things, and it's very, very complex. But, I worked with a lot of commanders and great people in the CIA and DOD and JSOC that are and feel like they're in conflict with doing the right thing as a human, as the things that they raise their hand for and what their government say. And I've never seen that in 30 years until this last few years. I've seen that. And one of the things I talk about a lot as I'm out speaking right now is just doing the right thing because it's the right thing. There's never a wrong time in your life to do the right thing. And it's in conflict with a lot of people's service right now because the government's making decisions or has been making decisions that isn't the right thing, and good people want to do the right thing. And so that's something I'll always, for the rest of my life, respect that about you, because everybody looks for ROI when they make a decision. What's the return on investment? I'll give my time, my energy, my resources, but what's the return on investment? What's the risk? Like, they calculate risk. Like, what's the, for you, there was a risk of getting in trouble for allowing dentists to do that. And whether, I don't think they did anything illegal, but just as a risk of, it not looking good and hurting your career. And you did the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because it's the best thing for you and your career. And I think a lot of people listening could take a lesson in that, because every single day we think of courage, and we think courage is like, running in front of a bullet or going and, do a rescue mission. But courage is just making the right decision sometimes, especially when it's not convenient for you, and especially where there's going to be maybe a sacrifice or consequences.
Yeah, I just want to do what makes my fathers happy.
Yeah. Where everybody has the ability to do that, in your everyday life, man. We need to, I think, as Americans, as humans, we just need to stop making decisions based on what we get out of it, and make the right decisions.
If you're, ultimately, right, like, if you believe that you have a creator that loves you as a father, and you're doing what you need to do to please him, he'll take care of you. Whatever that risk is, like, okay, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to have some career consequences. Like, you're talking about the God of the impossible.
Yeah.
You need a job. And I don't know how much time we have to get into it, but the job I have now at the Center for Security Policy, how I got that job? After I left active duty, it was good. That's a whole nother story one day, but like, it was a calling. It was a pretty amazing story. But the day that I finally, no kidding, 100% gave it up, like, Lord, I don't know what you wanted me to do, leaving active duty. I give it up to you, 100%. 6 hours later, I get a phone call about a job I didn't apply for. So he provides.
Yeah. This is you retiring from military, no plan. You're retiring
this is actually before retiring, because my last half of my career was in the reserves.
Okay.
And so my civilian job was with our nonprofit, the Center for Security Policy. But like, when I left active duty and joined the reserves, I didn't know what for. And it's a whole nother story, man. I need to share one day. But if I'm looking for guidance and I'm looking to please, there's one that's the first and foremost, and that's God. Yeah. And everything else will fall in place if you do that, right? It may not be easy, it might be tough. In fact, a lot of times all the tough stuff is for a reason, specifically designed to make you what you need to be for him. Just like everything you suffered through was for a reason, so you can be the man you are right now with the message you have. You are the messenger for that message. I don't know anybody else that's better, but you had to suffer immensely through that. And that was part of his plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I believe that. I believe that. Let's talk about the Center for Security Policy. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention.
Yeah, sure.
I'm a board member. So I get asked to do a lot of boards. I typically say no, because I just don't have the bandwidth to do it well. Not saying I'm doing it well with you guys, but it's a board that I agreed to be on, and mainly because of you and Frank, and just wanting to be behind what you guys are doing, because I really believe in the mission. Can you tell everybody what the Center for Security Policy is and what it does?
Yeah, we're a nonprofit. Mighty Oaks is a nonprofit, but this one is in the policy space, the national security policy space.
Right.
And I guess the simplest way to break it down is we provide uncompromised analysis, unflinching leadership, and unconventional solutions to keep Americans safer. And when you look at broadly right now within the U.S. government, there's a lack of all that. Uncompromised analysis. How do you know the truth about our adversaries, what they believe, right? So a lot of this stuff can be kind of politically incorrect, right? Mm-hmm. And then the unflinching leadership about it is speaking the truth about that, regardless of the consequences, right? And that's what our founder, Frank Gaffney, has done for 35 years. And he asked me to take over when he saw the end of my military career, asked me to take over as a new president and CEO. And then the unconventional solutions. And, that's a broad range. I could give lots of different examples. A lot of it's in the policy world, where there's like certain executive orders or laws that can get passed to help with respect to national security. And there's a lot of other creative stuff. Like right now, we're helping some states craft their RICO statutes, right? So the racketeering statutes, like why does that matter? Well, what if some of the things happening in universities across the country were predicate crimes under RICO? People go to jail. So the consequences for...
Give an example of that. Because lawmakers, I'll want to spearhead it with this. Lawmakers, whether they're state lawmakers or congressmen, they don't just because they got elected in doesn't mean they know how to write law or policy very well. And so there's nonprofits like Center for Security Policy that propose legislation and hand deliver it to them and say, this is what you need to implement. If you kind of do that for them.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different examples. A lot of times it's the lawmakers that do come up with a good idea. So whether we have a law that we can devise, and again, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, right? We're not a lobbying organization, but you can do a certain amount of this assistance, right? And that's what we do when they have a problem that they're looking at and they need a legislative solution for it. And it's a whole span of ideological threats to infrastructure related threats. For the sake of, let's just say infrastructure for now, because the ideological stuff can get a little bit, if you want to say politically incorrect or whatever.
Right.
So let's just stick with infrastructure as one example, right? So in this state, last week I was in Austin briefing the chairman of the Public Utility Commission of this state on a threat called solar weather, a geomagnetic disturbance, something that can take down the grid. And it's kind of crazy because literally after I spent about an hour breaking all this down and giving them all the information, I get on the airplane, I get a text message about a notice of a massive solar storm. I don't know if y'all remember this past weekend.
Was it a solar storm? Was it Chinese solar flare?
Aurora Borealis. Yeah, I mean, like
this is a real one.
Yeah, they who knows what China. To your point, though, China or adversaries of this country would use things like that to exploit.
Yeah.
But as a case in point, we were providing, and we have for 10 years provided the state various forms of legislation that could help harden your electric grid. Right. That's just one area of our work, and sort of legislative solutions, which then inspired innovation. The most innovative technology to protect electric substations from nuclear electromagnetic pulse came out of this town, Houston, Centerpoint Energy. Why? Because they saw what we were putting in the legislature 10 years ago and said, we better get ahead of this. So that's just kind of one example of this nonprofit. And here's another part of the example. As I explained to all the politicians and lawmakers and Public Utility Commission, we don't take any money from the government, from any foreign sources, or any industry that could profit off of what we do, which is unique, right? When you're looking at like DC-based think tanks, they take money from all three of those constantly, and they're trying to sell something. We're here for the public interest. And so it makes it a lot easier to be able to educate lawmakers, because then they're like, okay, good. Like, I'm not being sold something. But it also makes it harder when you're the CEO and you got to raise money.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because you got a lot smaller pool. Right. But that's okay. I'd much rather have a smaller pool and be able to do the right thing every day and not be beholden to some industry or foreign actor or government, so.
I want to kind of just stop, like kind of hard stop right here and say, if you're listening and you have the means to support something that where you worry about the national security of our country, that you can't donate to our government. You do every day in taxes, and you can see where it's going, right? Like, there's nothing more you could donate to than the Center for Security Policy to affect our national security. Like, and I say that not because I'm on the board. Like, I believe that. That's why I agreed to be on the board. Like, this is a place to financially support if you care about the national security of our company, because our government's not doing a good job of it. Clearly, bipartisan. By the way, they're not, and it takes organizations like the Center for Security Policy and what you guys are spearheading. And Frank's been at it a long time, and now you're at the helm, and definitely this is something to support. People could go to Center for Security Policy.
Yeah, centerforsecuritypolicy.org. And you can explore. I mean, it's if you're interested in what's going on in China, Russia, Ukraine, Middle East. I mean, those are all there. The infrastructure security piece we just talked about. And the other thing too is that we're not just helping. We help at the federal level where we can. There's still some good people in the federal government trying to do the right thing. We help them. We help a lot of whistleblowers. We expose a lot of what the federal government's not doing. But we now have really shifted to the states and local communities. And in fact, I mean, we're putting together something called the Resilient Communities Network. So when you're looking at law enforcement, emergency managers, and people who have they can actually make a difference for how resilient a community is.
It's called the Resilient Community.
It literally is. We've had that for like the last year, right? Yeah. So when you guys were like, "Hey, you want to be on this Resilient podcast?" I'm like, "Man, be careful," because I end up talking about my job. Like,
no, I want to hear about this. What is this? What is the Resilient Communities Network? This sounds.
Let me just I'll give you an example of a story, right? So it's a network of people who have a duty to help their community be resilient, whether they're law enforcement, or emergency managers. They're going to be holding the bag if something bad happens in their community, right? And so the more that they can be informed, go back to our mission, uncompromised analysis, right? If they're truly informed about the threats, that's huge because then they know what to look for. And then if they can be networked together, then as they see things in their communities, they can share that back and forth. Now, this is supposed to happen already within government, right? You have, fusion centers for intel and all that stuff. Okay. But, I do not believe that the truth about most of our adversaries is actually being properly shared in those networks. Right. And we could later get into all the details and examples of why. Right. But in this case in point, right, we have an emergency manager up in Maine who had for a long time been consuming the information and analysis we had on the grid, the electric grid, that is, not secure. So he goes about and creates an off-grid capable emergency operations center for his county. He's also consuming all the analysis that we have about food security, right? Because food is being used as a weapon. So he literally creates opportunities for food growth and distribution in that county in the vicinity of the emergency operations center, right? And then he's looking at certain ideological threats. He called me up. He said, "Hey, I got a grant, a government grant for this CVE training." I mean, think about how does the U.S. government, it used to be terrorism, right? Now it's violent extremism.
Yeah. Canning food.
What does that even mean?
Crops.
Yeah. What does that even mean, right? So he's concerned about eco-terrorists, right? These folks are like blowing up pipelines, and he knows there's only so many ways to get energy into his county. And he gets this grant to do countering violent extremism training. He's like, "Hey, can I hire you guys to come train us on eco-terrorists?"
So this is like pipelines, trains, chicken farms,
right?
Dairy farms, all things that we've seen,
these
right?
Things. I mean, yeah, look, you could go right now. I mean, just go type into like Amazon Prime, how to blow up a pipeline. There's a movie about it.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and this is like part of the curriculum in some of our colleges right now. And so he had this sense that like, I got this money from the government to get trained on this, but I just don't trust anybody but you guys. So can you train us? I said, yes and no. Yes, we can train you. No, we can't take your government money. Find somewhere else for it.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did. And you can even go to our site right now where you will see the report that we put together about what he's doing in his county. We then take that, we then share it to the network to help inspire other emergency managers to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So that's just kind of one example of like both infrastructure related and ideological related threats that we're helping address in a way that very few other, I don't know any other organization that's doing the same thing.
No. I mean, so people understand you have government organizations, you have NGOs, non-government organizations. Non-government organizations are we the people. And so 501c3s like that exist, so we the people have influence over the government to do the right thing and influence them to do the right thing and put pressure on them to do the right thing and hold them accountable to do the right thing. That's why organizations like you exist.
Yep. And to help the people when the government's failing. Right? Yeah. Just like your 501c3 did in Afghanistan and is doing it in Ukraine right now. Yeah.
Guys, if you don't have precious metals, you got to get your hands on some. The world is not a stable place. Our banking system certainly is not a stable place. So it's important to have precious gold and silver on hand. For me, precious gold, precious silver, and also precious lead to be able to protect yourself. But look, if you are not already into this, you need to go to MidasGoldGroup.com. Our friends there are incredible people. They're incredible patriots. They love America, and they have the best resources on precious metals. The owner, James Clark, is a Marine Corps veteran. He's a patriot, and he is my friend also. And they're just incredible people who know this market inside and out. And you could go there, and if you mention my name, Chad Robichaux, you will get free silver. You'll get some free silver, and you can invest in precious metals and have tangible precious metals on hand in a time of need when those financial markets go down. Go to MidasGoldGroup.com and get your precious metals today. Guys, you heard me say before, you will never hear me promote something that I don't use and don't believe in. One of the supporters of this show is BioPro. I am a believer in this product and offers you a complete growth factor profile. I mean, you're talking about improving your sleep, growing muscle, releasing your own growth hormones in your body, improving your metabolism, just bone density, the way you feel, your overall mood, your sexual desire, your libido, all these just incredible things that or come naturally if you could trigger it from your body. As BioPro does that for you. There's a lot of benefits I've heard of from other pro athletes that take this from special operators. But for me personally, I've definitely noticed the increase in recovery. But the biggest thing I've noticed for me is my sleep. Sleep's important to me. I function well with all the stuff I have to do, from speaking, from writing, to running Mighty Oaks, to doing podcasts like this, and going on international operations. Like, I have to have good sleep in order to be able to function at my highest level. And I was not getting it. I would sleep like 4 or 5 hours a night. It was kind of choppy, and I was doing all kinds of things for years. And as soon as I started taking BioPro, I started getting 8 to 9 hours of solid sleep. That's why I'm just hammering home how much I love this product. The people there are absolutely amazing. They're supporters of our military and first responders. They support Mighty Oaks. And the product is absolutely incredible. You have to try it. Go to BioPro, and if you enter the code BioPro30, you'll get 30% off. That's not my code. I actually don't want a code. I want you to get 30% off. And so enter BioPro30, and you get 30% off. Get yours today.
I mean, the NGOs out there sometimes are doing a hell of a lot more than what our tax dollars are paying for.
Yeah.
So, which is why, I am proud to be someone who will help as an advisory board role at Mighty Oaks. You know what I mean? It's a privilege.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. We get good people like you, man, just about to lock arms and support each other in our efforts, because it's all, one mission. It's all one mission. As we kind of wind this down, I want to hear a perspective on. I mean, we definitely, I think everybody, I gleaned some experience off of your individual resilience, but what could America as a country, based on your own experience and your experience at the Center for Security Policy, what is the state of resiliency for our country, and what can everyday Americans do differently to contribute to the resilience of America?
Well, the state of the republic is weak.
Yeah.
In many different ways. And the 4 pillars of resilience that y'all talk about are the 4 areas that we're weak. But I think the biggest is the spiritual, because that's the one that can make the most difference the fastest. I mean, you don't have to be a physical stud. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world. You don't even have to know a whole lot of people. But if you got your spiritual house in order, your creator will place you exactly where you have to be to make the biggest difference ever. So if there was going to be a kind of like a triage and priority, it would be get your spiritual house in order and then work on everything else from there. Because if you're following that, like I said, I mean, you could, right. How many muscle ups could Mother Teresa do? Yeah. She's a saint. How many people did she affect in a positive way? Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So that would be the first thing. And then follow what you guys are, practice what you guys are preaching in every other aspect, so it's kind of a short answer, but
no,
good answer.
Yeah. I mean, look, I just got back from, I don't want to spill the beans on our military when I get the privilege to go on behind closed doors, but I could tell you that our military, especially the Marine Corps, and we're friends with some of the leadership in the Marine Corps that's producing. They have really done their best job not to compromise, to cave on the standards of producing Marines, but who they're getting from the culture of America, it almost sets them up for failure. I mean, they're getting kids that the recruiters have to make a quota, and then when the recruiters send these kids to boot camp, they have to graduate a certain amount. They have to. The nation requires it.
Right.
But our culture is producing people that don't have resilience. They're weak. Physically, I mean, you got kids that show up at Marine Corps boot camp that can't do a pull-up, which is insane to me, that they can't even do a pull-up to get to Marine Corps boot camp. And then if they are in shape, they're so aesthetically in shape, their bone structure doesn't have the density to survive something as simple as Marine Corps boot camp. So the drill instructors are breaking kids down there. I mean, it's so mentally and physically, our culture is not producing what we need from a national security standpoint. And then socially, I mean, we have a socially corrupt culture in America, and then spiritually, we're lost spiritually. So these are essential for national security.
There's a way that the current leadership, if they really wanted to try to fix some of that, there's still people in our society, young people who are studs, who are built and ready. And you got to wonder if they're willing to serve. after what they've seen recently.
Yeah.
Well, the numbers say no. I mean, the recruiting, you got legacy families like your family with your grandparents, with my family, you know, and then I mean, I have friends with a guy, you just met him, Matt. Matt was Navy SEAL, and his son trained his whole life to be a Navy SEAL, and now he's not going to be. Why? Because of the state of our military and him not trusting to give his son to the United States military because of their motivations and interest. And that's a dangerous place for a country to be, because legacy families are very important, especially in special operations communities.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, you know, when my career ended over the thing we talked about before with a certain mandate that would cause me to violate the law and violate my conscience. And, you know, as I was waiting for word of my appeal, I mean, I tried to go on base, get a new ID card. I mean, they wouldn't let my family and I on base at the time, you know, and it was a certain protocol based on a certain pandemic. And, you know, so you think about, like, here's a guy with a top secret security clearance who just recently, you know, commanded one of the units in that particular part of the Marine Corps, barred access to the facility. All I want to do is just bring my family to see the Hall of Heroes, to pay our respects to fallen Marines, you know. And so that inflicts a moral injury, right? And that's what the Marine Corps did, unfortunately, with that particular mandate. I mean, every one of the requests for religious accommodation denied on the Marine Corps birthday. Boom, inflicts a moral injury.
And just to clarify, this is for the vaccine, because my son was one of them, requested, and I consulted with you on this at the time, like, to, like, my son's requesting a religious exemption, and I believe they illegally denied a blanket denial for every religious exemption. And then we appealed to the commandant, and then it was appealed to the Secretary of Navy, which didn't even allow that. And, you know, it was, I believe it was illegal. It was illegal. The whole thing was illegal from the beginning.
Yep. Yeah. And actually, I mean, look, I'll show you a book that Commander Rob Green wrote, Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. And it, you know, he's an active duty Navy sailor. He wrote this book, and he, you know, my wife was telling me, like, oh, you need to write a book about your experience with this whole thing. You know?
What's the name of it? Just to make sure everybody gets it.
Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. And what he did is he broke down exactly what you just said, Chad, about the nature of that being unlawful and really against the very Constitution. I mean, think about, if you don't have the freedom to choose what goes in your body, what kind of freedom do you have? And within the military, at least, there are certain laws that govern this particular topic, and those were grossly violated, specifically by officers, right? But before that, if you really truly go back and you look at it, what happened? We were told, don't worry, there'll be a process for religious accommodations. All you have to do is tell us your strongly held religious beliefs, which we did. And so somewhere in that federal enterprise is a massive database of what everybody believes religiously. And then those officers like myself who refuse to violate the law in order to force their subordinates to do this, were the ones that were forced to go. And so I was blessed because my change of command was already scheduled, October 2021. And so it was 3 or 4 hours after I passed a guide on at Third Force, the next commander, that the Marine Corps issued the word any unvaxxed commander would be immediately relieved for cause. So I was protected, so to speak, you know. And I felt blessed that it could have been a lot worse. You know, I was being respectful as best I could. But I tried for about a year to continue figuring out where I could serve. Nobody would take me. And then, of course, when Frank asked me to take over the nonprofit, I prayed about it. I'm like, I can't, there's no way I can do both anymore. And, you know, normally that retirement process takes about 4 months. And when I submitted my paperwork for retirement, I had a package in the mail in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So that kind of tells me something.
Yeah.
So I guess back to the point though about, you know, you want to increase the number of studs coming in to the military and going to boot camp. The number one recruiting tool that we could have right now is our general officers. If they were to say, okay, we screwed up. This is how we screwed up. We're going to make it right.
Yeah.
Without that, you got a lot of families. I mean, think about our families and think about what your son went through. And, you know, my son's literally about to put his thumbprint on the biometric scan to get his ID. And I'm realizing that they're not going to let me on that base. My son, step back. Don't put your stuff in the system. They don't trust me on the base. I don't trust them with your biometrics. And that's kind of where we are right now.
It's a national security issue.
It is. It is. And so, and that we're at our Center for Security Policy. Honestly, I pray about it all the time. I ask God for guidance on how do you fix this, right? Because our nation's special, right? I mean, the oath that we took is special. The way of life. I mean, look, this copy of the U.S. Constitution I keep with me all the time, and and it was given to me by the parents of one of those Marines that we just talked about before that died for us, for our freedom. And they said, never forget what he died for, right? And this is special. It's worth protecting. And so thankfully, I keep this oath every day working for a nonprofit, just the same way you do. But we need to fix it when it comes to the rest of the nation.
You say America's special. You say the Constitution is special. A lot of people right now are speaking against it, just saying America's not special. America's not exceptional. In fact, you get demonized for saying having national pride and called the racist for having national pride. Why do you think America is special? Why do you think that right there, the Constitution is special?
Well, everything that stemmed from this, but before it was created and during its creation was inspired by God, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what makes it special. You have 5,000 years of human history where it was mostly darkness and tyranny. And the men that put this together, I think, were inspired by their creator. I mean, they were pretty obvious about it. You can read it in the Declaration and in the Constitution. And then all of the, when you go back and you look at the biographies of the people who put it together, you can see that, and you look at just the formation of our country and the miracles. I mean, George Washington's, so many examples that he gave us of prayer and the power of prayer, right? And even, there was a time when Benjamin Franklin, they say that he was kind of like the least religious among most of the founders, where they're at the Constitutional Convention arguing back and forth over how they're going to form this government, and he reminds all of them that we should never have won. We fought the world's strongest empire at the time. And he's like, do you not remember how we prayed before those battles and how we, the miracles that took place? We need to stop and pray before every single meeting. And then, within a couple months, there was a lot of arguing back and forth, but they started with prayer. And within a few months, we had something that, you look at what this country's achieved, in so many different areas. And it's something special. But it's special because it came from our creator. Yeah.
And I believe it still is special.
Absolutely.
Regardless of who's trying to take it away from us, I believe it's still special. It's still worth fighting for. It's a tough thing, though. I have conflicts, internal conflicts about that, but I do believe it's still worth fighting for.
There's a lot of ways to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one thing I love and I want to highlight as we close is we're talking about national security. We're talking about military community. We're talking about first responder communities, but even men outside of that are fathers and husbands and leaders inside their community, maybe don't serve in that capacity. But I think, a lot of times, and we're not doing that here, but a lot of people point, right? Like, oh, it's their problem. It's the school system's issue, or it's our military's issue, or it's the government's issue. And I think we need to also be pointing back at home a lot and say, hey, how are you leading at home? Are you creating a culture of strength and courage and honor in your family? Are you leading your wife and your children? Are you guys gathering at the table together and eating a meal and praying for, and whatever it is that you're doing to push forward a strong culture in your family? I think a lot of men aren't doing that these days. And so,
Serving. How do you serve?
Yeah, dude, we got to talk about serving before we get off. You got to show us this cool gift that you brought us.
I brought you guys some gifts.
The Oyster Bed. Pull it out.
We have gifts for you, but we got you go first.
And then explain to us on this topic of family and the attack on the family that we're seeing today, how you guys created this product to bring the family together.
Yeah. So, I told you guys a story about how we have a big family, and every time that I would deploy overseas, our whole family we'd all get together with a whole bunch of seafood and just spend time together as a family before that trip, right? And so my fourth deployment, we had all gotten together. We had a sack of oysters and a bunch of different seafood, and my brothers and I were shucking oysters, trying to keep up. Now I like them raw the best personally. Just want to shuck them, right there with a cold beer. But if I want to cook them, man, it's kind of a pain, right?
Yeah.
You've done it before. You're just tipping over in the grill and it smells great, And so, we're sitting there, gosh, it's got to be a better way to cook these oysters. And if you just could get them right out the gallon, because you can buy them like that, right? And my mom, she, she's just kind of just talking a little
We said a
trash.
gallon, just like a bucket with shucked oysters.
Yeah,
inside,
just like just the oyster meat, like in South Louisiana and all over, they're already shucked, right? So that's when you go to a restaurant and you get them fried or whatever. And so my mom's like, I got 7 kids and nobody's ever invented anything. The lady with the redneck wine glass is a millionaire.
Yeah.
And she kind of like threw down like little, like a challenge. And so my brother Adam, to his credit, like he started thinking like, man, we could probably figure out a way to make something to cook pre-shucked oysters. And I'm driving to Camp Lejeune to push overseas. And he calls me, he said, man, I know what we're going to call that thing. I'm like, what? He's like, the thing we said we were going to make when we were, for the oysters. I'm like, yeah, call it the Oyster Bed. I'm like, dude, that's a great name, you know? And so I pulled over and Secretary of State website, create the LLC, get the web domain, call him back. I'm like, hey, I'm be going for a year. I need you to make a prototype. I need you to figure out. And he did,
Because that's the oyster beds where the oysters lay on the bottom of the.
Yeah, an oyster bed exactly is like the reef where they grow. So it's a perfect name. And so big credit to my brother Adam for coming up with the design and all. But this is just one of them. And so you imagine you get your pre-shucked oysters in here with your Cajun butter sauce and all that. And it keeps just the right amount of fluid in each one of these little cooking wells. The rest of it drains off in the reservoir, and everybody fights over that with their French bread, And so it's a lot of fun. But when we were looking at starting a company, I was trying to do research on entrepreneurship, and I read Dave Ramsey's book EntreLeadership, and he referenced a video by a guy named Simon Sinek. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It's the Golden Circle, right? Yeah. Talks about the why of a company, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we started thinking about the why of this company, it was first and foremost, it was to bring families around the table and closer to God. That was first, right? And then second, to help save our coastlines. And then third, to cultivate creative cooking. And every chance we get, that's how we try to use it, bringing families around the table and closer to God. And that's part of how I was brought up and how I was blessed. And so it's the one fun job I have, you know what I mean? Not that the other national security stuff is not fun. But it is. It's
you throw this in the oven or throw it on a grill.
Yeah. So and look, it's not just oysters. I mean, just for Mother's Day yesterday, we did the most amazing like breakfast bites, right? So you spray it down with some ham, and you put like cold cut ham, drop an egg in there, some bacon bits, and some cheese on top, stick in the oven, and each one of the little protein bites just scoop right out, dude. You could it's perfect.
Yeah.
So it's very versatile, but I mean, look, and even like a surf and turf, you take like a 6 or 8 ounce fillet and you sear it on the grill while you do shrimp and scallops and all those wells with the butter. And then you serve it, you thin slice that fillet and stick it in that well and bring it out to the table. I mean, look, don't even get me started.
Yeah.
But like I said, that the real, and then what we do is we donate to every one of the, oyster shell recycling program. So all the other 501c3 nonprofits that do oyster shell reclamation and recycling throughout the country, we have coupon codes based on wherever you live. You can get a 15% off, and then we'll donate to that nonprofit. So we're doing everything we can to help with the coastal conservation aspect of it as well. And in Louisiana, where you and I are from, we're losing a football field of land every hour to coastal erosion. And oyster reefs can help prevent that. And so part of what this product does is it incentivizes more consumption of oysters pre-shucked, and then making sure that those shells get back into the estuaries to build new reefs. So anyway, that was my gift I brought I wasn't planning on talking about it on the show, but
you brought it. I'm like, got to talk about it.
Oysterbed.com. Is that right?
The oysterbed.com.
Oysterbed.com.
Even if you're not from Louisiana, you don't have oysters available. There's tons of stuff you can do with this.
Now, the gift I brought for the two of you is a steak bed, right? It's a sizzler plate for steak. You guys are meat eaters. I can just kind of tell, you know what I mean? So I've gotten spoiled with this. And we had a chef that was using our oyster beds and said, man, I need you to make me an indestructible steak plate. I'm like, why? He's like, well, you go to like Ruth's Chris and you get this, sizzling steak on butter sizzling, and like, man, no, actually, I hadn't eaten yet at a Ruth's Chris. It's kind of expensive. And he's like, the reason it's expensive is because, that's a high quality steak. But you're also, the restaurants are only getting 8 or 10 uses out of a plate before it breaks because of the thermal shock, right? And so he educated. I didn't know, like a good steak, you want to let it rest for like 5 minutes before you cut into it.
Open,
because then all the juices rehydrate throughout the whole piece of meat. Well, you put this sucker in your oven or on your grill, get it hot. And you slightly undercook that steak a little bit less than you would normally do, right? Slap your butter on top of here, put the steak, you let it rest for 5 minutes. Every bite is nice and hot, and then all your juices here. Y'all gonna be spoiled, man.
Yeah, buddy. That's what I'm talking about.
So,
and then
anyway,
you got it.
That's the Trinity. Yeah, we got a whole bunch of stuff, man. But so if you wanted to do a surf and turf So that's another restaurant. This is a James Beard award-winning restaurant in New Orleans. It was like, hey, can you make us a little small one? And this is, look, I'm going to go ahead and admit something. You're going to laugh about this. Okay. I'm the owner of this Cajun cookware company. And they call me up and they're like, hey, we got this invite to go cook at the James Beard house in Manhattan. And, can you make this special product like really fast? I hate to admit it. I didn't like even know anything about James Beard. This is like the NFL, like, it's like the Super Bowl for like chefs.
I don't know who he is either. Yeah.
Like if you want to talk about like, if you won the Super Bowl as a chef, it would be getting the James Beard Award. This was to go cook at the guy's house in Manhattan.
Wow.
So when I got a wonderful lady that helps us with social media and all, and I told her, I'm like, man, these guys want me to do this really fast. And I don't know, it's a lot of money. And she said, what is it for? She said, you don't know what oh my gosh. And so, but anyway, if you look on the back of it, so we call it a Trinity. We made it happen in time, but the back of it's got 3 crosses on the back, the Trinity. And so we got to try to keep our faith pretty front and center.
That's awesome, man.
And everything that we do. But yeah, you guys will enjoy it, man.
We'll thank you so much. Yeah,
we got some gifts for you.
Yeah,
we have amazing sponsors for the show: Smith & Wesson, Gators Glasses, Midas Gold, BioPro. So Midas Gold Group is Marine Corps owned. A guy named James Clark started a precious metals company.
Really?
I'm always thinking apocalypse. Bitcoin's great, but having gold and silver and lead are the most important. So lead I get from Ammo Supplier, gold and silver I get from Midas Gold. And so he want you to have a gold eagle. Here we go. Silver eagle.
Oh, wow. Silver eagle.
So there you go. And for those listening, if you want a free piece of silver, you go to MidasGoldGroup.com. If you mention my name, you'll get some free silver as well. And it's super important for, just security. Make sure you have that on hand, some precious metals on hand. Additionally, Gators Glasses. Gators is a sponsor of the show, and whatever pair of Gators you want, you just go on the website, pick a pair out. We'll make sure you get them.
Yeah, man, I appreciate that.
I don't know if you've worn.
I actually need some new eye pro.
Have you worn Gators before?
No, I hadn't tried.
They're phenomenal. They're phenomenal, man. Ballistic, just the ballistics of them, and just the frame. Yeah, there's some really good ones out there. I'll help you if you need some help picking some.
I might need some.
Yeah, and we'll get you a pair of Gators, and then we have a swag bag from Mighty Oaks, and I think you might have some of this stuff already, but it's just a swag bag of some stuff from Mighty Oaks.
I appreciate it.
Some books and stuff like that.
Man, so I'm all about some Mighty Oaks.
Yeah.
So no, thank you, man.
So, and then, hey,
it's a privilege.
I just did my endorsements for my new book, Mission Without Borders. And so Tommy made got it in time, and he's doing endorsers for the book. So
awesome.
I read it. That. I needed to read that book when I needed to read it too. I mean, especially the chapter at the end that Hunter wrote.
Yeah.
By God's timing.
Yeah.
Right. Because we talked about it before. Like, what do you do about some of the issues we talked about during the interview, especially with the military? Like, I pray every day, and but it's on His timing.
Yeah,
those answers will come when He's ready.
Yeah.
So I needed to read that book.
Yeah, I'm very proud of it. So Mission Without Borders is my new book coming out on August 13th, but you can pre-order it. You can pre-order it now, and it definitely helps me out to pre-orders for books. Not just me, anybody that's writing a book and you want to support them, pre-order that book. It helps the retailers make their orders. So.
Yeah, I'm happy to endorse it too, because it's a phenomenal story, and it needs. I mean, really, anybody and everybody can benefit from reading it. I mean, you don't have to be somebody interested in national security. I mean, mom, dad. I mean, it's because of the fatherhood and son aspect of it, of you having to let go. Yeah, I mean, if you're a mom or a dad, you need to read it.
When I started writing, I didn't know that's the direction we're going to go. But right away, I just felt in my heart like that's the story we need to tell, not the Ukraine story. And you talk about the fear of a father, the control of a father, and trusting God. So yeah, I'm pumped about it. But man, it's awesome to have you here.
Definitely. So definitely, man.
Yep, great job.
Sweet.
That's a wrap.
That's it.
Awesome. Right. Thank you, brother.
What's up, guys? Sean here, one of your hosts at Resilient. Thank you for watching the show. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any bonus content and future episodes. We have some amazing guests that share their story of resilience, and you won't want to miss it.